Ray, post 100. He's in the 60s on the others. Zach Plesac, 114 on ESPN, where he has a 71 on Yahoo and 62 there. I mean, the list just keeps going on. Jesus Christ. Dylan Bundy at 144. That's 40 spot difference. Framber Valdez, 119. He's inside the top 200 on the others. Ian Anderson has almost a 60-point, does have a 60-point difference on the other two sites. 158 on ESPN, inside the top 100 on the others. And I'm not going to list, there's a couple more. We'll just talk about them. But
and honestly, this is me cutting it back. Because
I get it. I totally see it.
Different. You know, it's mainly starting pitchers, and it's just ridiculous how much they're devaluing them. But we see that every single year from ESPN, regardless of the sport, they take a position and bury it. Remember in ESPN for football, it was quarterbacks. Quarterbacks were unbelievably cheap here at starting pitching.
And that lets you know, first off, if your primary experience is ESPN, you need to adjust. You're going to need to adjust with pitching in other places. If you think you're like, oh, I'm going to get, Sonny Gray at 104, and then I can get Dylan Bundy in the 140s or Framber. No, you won't. You're not. It's not going to happen. So it's a rude awakening. But also, this lets you know that there are depth pitching deals to be had. I would rather. You
probably don't want to do those high. You probably don't want to go into ESPN with a high pitching strategy because it's so available later.
Yeah.
Because most people aren't going to make their own ranks and do their own thing. If you're in one of those leagues, then obviously this isn't going to help you too much because those people all take it seriously and all that stuff. But if you're in your regular league where you have maybe 4 or 5 hardcore people and the rest are kind of casual, and then there's a couple tacos in your league, then you're going to get pitching cheap if you wait on it. So
and there's plenty of guys in here.
You want to avoid those high pitching strategies for ESPN.
I would rather pay 119 for Framber Valdez. I would rather pay 158 for Ian Anderson. Those would be better, but it's not the case in most places, but it is on ESPN. There are some hitter ones. Kevin Biggio pops in at 82, and it does look like he's got the multi-position on ESPN. He's 57 on Yahoo, 53 on on Fantrax, which does not surprise me in the Dynasty mold. 77 on Fantasy Pros, though. So ESPN and Fantasy Pros are a little bit more in line on where Kevin Biggio sits, but this is a place you're going to get him at a deal. I don't think you sit around and wait to try to get him in the 80s, but if you had a pick around like 55 and you're like, crap, I got to get him, there's a chance you could come back around, especially if he's not popping up on the board or people are paying too much of attention to the rank that he's on there. He's just lower on ESPN.
And the funny thing is, and I didn't even notice this till we're doing it right now, is that a lot of these hitters on this list, second base eligible. Biggio, second base.
Yeah.
Keston Hiura, second base. And even if we scroll down, Cronenworth also on here, and Kim. Kim doesn't qualify at second yet, but he's going to be playing second. So
yeah, that's a good point. Here's another one of those: 84, 69, nice on Yahoo, 58 on Fantrax. I don't know why I can't keep saying them.
Too many fans,
I guess. Fantasy Pros 65. I'm into the buyback on Hira, but I'm very much about the discount. So there's actually a little bit of a discount on Yahoo for Keston Hiura, more on ESPN. Both guys that you can get those on. So that's a really good note to notice. Some others: Sixto 162 on ESPN. He's going like 40 spots lower. David Price, another 40 spot difference in the 200s. 202 for David Price here. Yuli Gurriel, cheap first baseman. He's massively different than the other guys, but he's closer to Fantasy Pros. 219 here.
And he's actually expensive. I screwed that one up. So because he's 282
you're right.
and 298 on the other sites, and he's 219 here. So that's my bad.
Aaron Savali, though, I'm all about Aaron Savali this year. 230 on ESPN.
Love that.
161 on Yahoo. I think they're all deals. That's a great one. John Means, 275. There's another low-end guy that you can pick up. And then Bogman put a list of players. We're not going to go through all of them. We can pick a couple here. These were post 300 deals on ESPN, and you'll see the likes of Garrett Hampson, 301. Let's see, David Dahl, 372. CJ Cronenworth, Jesus, CJ Cron. If he were to make Colorado at 389 to 1, I like TJ Antone with Cincinnati. He's 414. Jared Kelenic, 468 if you want to get in there. And Renato Nunez, 513 as he signed, I believe it was a minor league deal, but if he makes it with Detroit. Those are some decent deals post 300.
Yeah, and honestly, these are nice, but Yahoo is where you want to look at those. So, because Yahoo, remember, they bury guys in the thousands and thousands. So I have a couple of those picked out for Yahoo as
okay. Well, let's do this because we're going to do one more and then do the quick break. Let's go through Fantrax. Let's save Yahoo on the other side here to compare. Fantrax is always interesting because they do get valued on keeper, and it kind of can dictate some of the ADP. Because we've been saying it for years. We've never had anybody tell us different. But I'm assuming their ADP is driven by all their drafts, and more predominant amount of their drafts are via Dynasty. They also have best balls, which can skew them. So I'm just not super interested in the ADP or score data that Fantrax presents. Now, they're the most customizable, and you can do anything you want with them, which makes them so great, but I'm not interested in what they tell me. I'm not interested in the projections. I'm not interested in the ADP or anything like that, because I feel like it's skewed a bit. And here's a trend. You will pay for some pitching on Fantrax. And Bogman, I don't see a ton of names here. So did you have a hard time? Were they kind of like a medium between everybody? Because there's only like 6 expensive names on this list, and they're all pitchers.
Yahoo and Fantrax Welsh are kind of close. They're fairly similar as far as their rankings go. Rankings for Yahoo, ADP for Fantrax. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you something's linked, but maybe something's linked. Between the two. So I'm more concentrating on finding deals for Fantrax. So I found more deals than expensive players, but the expensive players, and this is just part of the strategy that goes into the 2021 season. They're all pitchers. The expensive players on this list. They're
not like, there's a couple there's a couple big dudes on here, but there's not a ton. Like the first one is Clayton Kershaw. You will pay up for him in Fantrax. I feel like that might be best ball driven, but who knows? 26 is where he's going, where he's 40 on the other two sites, 34 in Fantasy Pros. You're going to pay up for him. One more quotation mark. Ace is Hyunjin Ryu, where you will pay 63 on Fantrax for him, where he's cheaper everywhere else. Excuse me. Fantasy Pros 82. He goes 81 on ESPN and 87 on Yahoo. I got to get the color scheme down in my brain here. So he is cheaper everywhere else except for Fantrax. Those are the two big dogs. Then you have Herman Marquez, 131 on Fantrax, that 40 spot difference on the other two sites. Chris Bassett, 153 on Fantrax, which is about 30 spot different than the other sites. Dallas Keuchel, there's a 40 spot difference. He's at 160. And Christian Javier, 179, where
That's
he's
probably my fault.
Where he's post 200 everywhere else. Oh, because you love Javier.
Because I've been taking him in the mocks that we did over the off season. I took him in probably 3 or 4 months. But I don't know that I took him before 200, maybe one time. And I don't think I even took him as high as 179 ever. So a little surprising. His Fantasy Pros high is 172, and his Fantrax rank is 179.
And here's the skewy thing.
That's fairly surprising.
The skewy thing is, and this, again, it affects, is their score is based off of whatever algorithm they do from the previous year that puts them higher, so that when people do drafts, all the guys, doesn't matter, there's no weighting. It's just how they performed last year. Marco Gonzalez is a perfect example. That guy was ranked so high in their system, people would draft him in the top 100. So their score skews the ADP because those players are in everyone's faces. Javier would be one of those guys. So, better or worse, whatever it is, you just need to know that. And those are some guys that are going to cost up here. You did mention there are deals. Yes, there are deals on Fantrax. And how about this one? This is a fantastic guy to get a deal on. Eloy Jimenez. 40 on Fantrax, where it's going to cost you 29 on Yahoo, 24 on ESPN. But that 40, it's close to Fantasy Pros because the consensus rankers have them around 39. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Also interesting, ESPN is one spot lower than the absolute highest human being on Fantasy Pros ranks at 23, Eloy. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. He's very, very expensive on ESPN, and that's funny. Our guy Joe, very, very much the points league player. He's high on ESPN, and Joe took him in our mock. So a lot of speed guys on here, a lot of guys that had issues, and a lot of off-season stuff as well. I kind of think that we see in here, and just overall the Welsh. relief pitching a little bit muted on Fantrax because I think, like you mentioned before, the dynasty and keeper league aspects of Fantrax.
Starling Marte, I love the deal on this one for Fantrax. 59 for Starling Marte. He goes in the 40s in the other spots. Javier Baez, another one of those just bounce back players. I don't think I even realized he was going in the 60s or ranked in the 60s on ESPN and Yahoo. He is, which I hate not having as much of a deal.
For Fantrax, he's only 4 spots higher than his Fantasy Pros low. His Fantasy Pros low is 88. He's 84 on Fantrax.
Yeah, the Fantasy Pros rankers, the consensus rankers, is high. It's actually highest of anything, that's like a weird one. 59 is his consensus ranking, where it's not where he sits like on Yahoo and ESPN. So Baez not much of a deal. We told you about Lourdes Gurriel potentially getting more positions to play. He's only going to cost you 100 on Fantrax. That's where he sits. 71 on ESPN, lower than his Fantasy Pros rank. It's a deal. That's a solid one. Jeff McNeil, another one of those, 106 outside the top 100. He's going in the 80s on Yahoo, so you can see there's a deal to be had there. Dinelson Lamet, he's an odd one just because of the injury that sits out there. People are terrified of him. Well,
and he's a guy that moved. Like I said, not many players moved. But Lamet went down. Like, I think he was closer to 100 or 98, somewhere in that range, when I did it a week ago. And because of, the Padres adding pitching relentlessly and all that stuff.
I think it's the injury stuff. People are terrified of the injury. 78 on Yahoo, 114 on Fantrax. That's the difference. So if you're going to dip your toe in Fantrax, it's easier to do. He's just going to cost you probably a little bit less. You got a closer, Ryan Presley, very cheap here, 145, near 100 on the others. Will Myers, 152 in the 120s. He's a 103 on ESPN. Nick Anderson, another closer, 213. That's over a 50 spot difference. But this next one trips me out. Victor Robles, 224 on Fantrax. 145 on ESPN, which, you keep harking the points thing, but that's a speed guy. 163 on Yahoo with a 152 Fantasy Pros consensus rank. Over 70 spot difference for Victor Robles from his Fantasy Pros to where he is ranked on Fantrax. That's a deal.
It is a deal. And I'm not a Robles guy, and that's a deal. But I think the main point of Robles' rank, and I think he's going to move up and up and up as we get closer to the season.
I agree with that.
Is the fact that he had such a terrible 2020. He hit 220. He stole 4 bases, hit 3 homers, played in 52 games. So he had a decent amount of games, just didn't play very well. Only 20 runs in 52 games, only 15 RBI. Like, his year was so terrible, and you can draft the fastest in Fantrax. After the season started. So I think he left a sour taste in people's mouths, and that's why he's going so much lower there than any other place.
And he's also coming off of all of the just bad launch angle EV stuff, wasn't hitting the ball super hard, and it doesn't help that he's going to hit in the back end of the order, but I don't care, dude. Like, with those stolen bases, and he has power that has not been tapped into it. 224, it's such a freaking deal. There are closer deals. Rafael Montero, we've kind of mentioned it's a trend here, the deals on the closers. Rafael Montero in the 230s, which he's inside the top 200 everywhere else. Nick Madrigal, another massive deal, 279, where he's in top 200.
Look at his Fantasy Pro high and low.
Yeah, someone has him at 36 on. They must be ranking just a second base OBP only league. That's crazy. But someone has him at 36 Madrigal, a low of 240.
I'm trying to look up who it is right now.
Is it Raju? He's not doing that.
It says site projections from RotoChamp. That's what.
Wow.
Yeah. So that I don't know.
Okay, but post 300, there are more closers. Amir Garrett at 305. Take it. Archie Bradley, I think, is another good one. 315. You've got Daniel Bard down here at 343. Those are some closer ones. Some other of note: Willie Calhoun, 314. I mentioned TJ Antone. He's here at 318. Evan White, 325. Nunez is 340 on Fantrax. Think of that difference between ESPN and Fantrax for Nunez. Luke Weaver at 357. I kind of dig that. And massive deal on Fantrax. Elvis Andrus, 422. Going to might potentially lead off for the A's, the new shortstop. Take advantage of that. That is a huge deal. There's some pretty good ones on Fantrax.
There are some good ones, but the thing that I'll say about this is because I go by ADP here, and most people do while you're drafting. You can go by the score if you want. You're allowed to flip it between the score and ADP, but ADP is where most people go. These move the most.
Sure.
ESPN and Yahoo are kind of set in stone. these will move as ADP goes up. So guys like Colton Wong, like CJ Cron, and Elvin